Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, the fourth module of our Equity Indicator series on how to improve access and enrollment in rigorous coursework. I am Ishay Collins, honored to serve as Director of the Equity Assistance Center South here at the Southern Education Foundation, and today I am joined by an amazing team of experts from the National Academy of Education. Today's webinar will focus on exploring the vital role of rigorous coursework in academic success. This includes equitable access from elementary through secondary education. In our time together, we will uncover the effects of unequal access to challenging courses on educational outcomes across racial and ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds. And also together, we will learn strategies to minimize these disparities and create inclusive academic settings. Before we begin, I would like to provide a little more information about the Equity Assistance Center South. We are one of the 4 Equity Assistance Centers in the nation funded by the United States Department of Education, which serves public education systems by addressing issues of equity. We advise, assist, and serve public schools and districts in their work to provide a more equitable opportunity for students in the areas of race, national origin, sex, and religion as required by law. We serve Region 2, which supports 11 states, Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. If you are in any of those states or regions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us, and we can also get you connected to other Equity Assistance Centers. We provide a range of technical assistance and training to school districts and agencies at no cost. Again, I'm going to share that with you at no cost, so please let us know how we can help. We would love to work closely with you all, and we will share our contact information at the end of today's presentation and also in the chat. And so now I will turn it over to Ms. Amy Berman, Deputy Director of the National Academy of Education, who will facilitate today's session. You have it, Amy.
Thank you so much, Aisha. It's a delight to be here with you today. My name is Amy Berman. I'm the Deputy Director, as Aisha said, of the National Academy of Education, and on behalf of the Academy, I welcome you all here today. I am joined by 2 members of the National Academy, Mikal Kurlander and Carolyn Tyson, as well as by Oswaldo Alvarenga, who is from the Dallas Independent School District. I will be turning it over to them shortly. In 2019, the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine came out with the Monitoring Educational Equity Consensus Report. A highly esteemed group of education experts and scholars, including Professor Tyson, formed the Committee on Developing Indicators of Educational Equity. The committee was formed to identify key indicators for measuring and monitoring the extent of equity in the nation's K-12 education system. The purpose of such indicators is not to track progress towards aggregate goals, such as that all students graduate high school within 4 years of entering 8th grade, but to identify differences in progress toward that goal, differences in students' family background and other characteristics, and differences in the conditions and structures in the education system that may affect students' education. A carefully chosen set of equity indicators can highlight disparities, provide a way to explore potential causes, and point towards possible improvements. Systematically collected, indicators can allow valid comparisons within schools, as well as of schools, districts, and states across a number of important student outcomes. So while no one indicator can tell the full story, taken together, a set of indicators can provide a detailed and nuanced picture that can help inform and enlighten policymakers, policy implementers, states, districts, leaders, and educators. So in undertaking this task, the committee developed a set of 16 equity indicators, as well as measurements to assess disparities. This webinar, we're going to address equity indicator 11, disparities in access and enrollment in rigorous coursework. As the report notes, research has long shown that differences in exposure to challenging courses and instruction contribute to disparities in educational outcomes by race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. With this overarching data in mind, let me introduce you to our agenda. And also, as you're going through the presentation, please feel free to place questions in the chat, and we're going to attempt to get to as many of these questions as possible at the end. So first, I'm going to turn it over to McCall and Carolyn, who will be talking about the research basis for the importance of access to and enrollment in rigorous coursework, measures, and what schools can do. Then we're going to have lessons from the South. We're going to hear from Osvaldo Alvarenga of the Dallas Independent School System about the innovative ways that they are working to address rigorous coursework within their very large school system. And then I will also provide some information about what Memphis Shelby County is doing. Also, please note that there's a lot of information on a lot of these slides, and in a lot of them, you're going to see either partial citations or footnotes. There's a really large bibliography at the end of the presentation, which will be shared on the EX South website. So you'll have access to all of this research and anything that you would like to look at, afterwards. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Professor Tayson to start us off.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mikhail and I are so happy to be here and so pleased that you all could join us for this very important conversation. This slide just gives you a general outline of the topics that we'll address this afternoon. And I'm just going to go ahead and get started with a little bit of background and context to set the stage. So the chances are that you're at this webinar because you're well aware of the racial and ethnic disparities in access and enrollment in rigorous courses and programs. What you may not know is just how longstanding these disparities are. When American schools finally began to desegregate, many used deliberate strategies that placed Black students in one educational pathway, and not just in separate classrooms, but sometimes on separate wings or separate floors of the same building, and white students on another educational pathway. And Asian, Latino, and Hispanic students, depending on the region of the country, also experience these differential pathways. White students were more likely to be placed in gifted and advanced classes, preparing them for classic liberal arts education, while other students were given an education to prepare them for manual and service labor. So many schools then were able to maintain segregation by using tracking. Tracking, as you all know, is the organizational practice of sorting students for instruction based on perceived intelligence or ability or prior or projected achievement. And by now, we all understand the history of race-based thinking, but these patterns have become taken for granted. So it's important to understand a little bit of this 20th century history of racialized tracking, because it's easier then to see how these disparities are manufactured, and then to understand that we can, in fact, change them. We can undo them. They are not inevitable nor intractable. One reason we should care about this is that early work looking at the effects of desegregation found that Black and other children from disadvantaged backgrounds learn better in integrated schools. And that much we know from the 1966 report on equality of educational opportunity. But what we know now as well is that desegregating schools, but not classrooms or the curriculum, undermines the goals of integration, of equality of opportunity, and of educational equity. Not only do students not get the opportunity to learn together, but we afford some students access to the kinds of rigorous coursework that better prepares them for college and other important post-secondary school opportunities, while other students are systematically denied those opportunities. So we begin this conversation today. As we begin, I want to inject the words of the editors of a 1970s volume on institutional racism in America. They began the volume with the dedication to the belief that institutions are made by men and women and can be unmade, changed by men. Let us be about that task. So now I'm going to turn over to Michal to take us through some of the current documented disparities by race and ethnicity in class.
Thank you, Carolyn. We can go ahead and advance the slide. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I get to further set the stage by providing several slides to illustrate the inequalities in access and enrollment to these courses that we are trying to address. So here we see research cited by the National Academy Report, which looks across and between schools, both by race and SES. So here in this slide, you can see that high schools with high populations of minoritized students, defined as Black, Hispanic, Latinx, American Indian, and Pacific Islander students. In schools that serve high populations of these minoritized students, they have less access to more advanced courses. This we see in math and science, and also less access to accelerated courses such as advanced placement and dual enrollment. For example, 70% of these schools do not offer calculus as compared to 40% schools in the lower quartile of serving minoritized populations. The science numbers are similarly problematic. 1 in 3 do not offer biology, and we see schools with high minoritized populations are much less likely to offer dual enrollment than low rates of minoritized student populations. We can go ahead and advance a slide. The next slide looks at this by poverty, and we see students in schools with higher concentrations of free and reduced price lunch eligibility, higher rates of students in poverty have less access to these math and science, advanced math and science courses, and less access to advanced placement and dual enrollment. We can go ahead and advance the slide. Here, we're going to take a closer look at math, which is one of the most important gateway paths to post-secondary attainment, specifically college, but also for the labor market. And here we're going to look at rates of math course taking by both race and socioeconomic status. So just to orient you to this graph for a minute, this is going to show us the rates of math participation for each of the dominant racial ethnic subgroups and by SED, socioeconomically disadvantaged and non-socioeconomically disadvantaged. So statewide data from California. And here we can focus, just to narrow the focus a little bit, we can look at red and dark blue, which are courses that are the most advanced. Red is AP math course taking, and blue is advanced math courses above Algebra 2. And so we can see the disparities both within each racial group by socioeconomic disadvantage, that is across all racial and ethnic groups. Students who are from lower socioeconomic status backgrounds are taking advanced math courses at lower rates than their similar race, more affluent peers. And we also see, regardless of socioeconomic status, we see racial disparities in advanced math course taking. Just want to highlight for a minute the yellow. The yellow is no math enrollment. This is predominantly in the senior year or junior and senior year. And so we can see many students also do not take math their senior year. In California, for example, that rate is about a quarter. A quarter of seniors do not enroll in math. And those rates have big disparities across both race and socioeconomic disadvantage. Turning beyond math to something that's of importance of recent years, which is dual enrollment. That is the act of participating in college level courses while you're still enrolled in high school, being duly enrolled in a community college course where the majority of dual enrollment happens. So sometimes four-year institutions offer some dual enrollment as well. And so this is an important pathway to college, that is getting exposure to college while you're still in high school. And California, the state I'm focusing on here, shows growth in dual enrollment, a bit of a rising tide lifts all boats story, but we can also see over time, but we can also see really big disparities between dual enrollment participation, for example, between Asian student subgroups and white student subgroups and Black and Latinx student subgroups. And we see this even as the enrollment increases for all groups over time. Turning to advanced placement, another form of exposure to college while still in high school, that is taking a college level type class, advanced placement class, while you're still in high school. This is important to both think about participating, but in an AP class, but also in passing the exam, which is what actually formally gives you college credit once enrolled. So this is 2019 data. We can see that over 70% of Asian American students and 56% of Filipino students took at least one AP exam, whereas the rates for other racial ethnic subgroups were much lower, 44% for whites, 38% for Latinx students, 31% for Pacific Islanders, and a quarter, 25.6% for Black students. I'm going to turn it back over to Carolyn now.
Thank you. Okay, so because of the widespread belief that these disparities result from Black and Latino students' resistance to education, for far too long they have either been ignored or not directly addressed. The idea that Black and Latino students in particular think that it's not cool to be smart or to do well in school and therefore withhold effort was the dominant narrative for quite some time. But by the early to mid 2000s, the evidence was building that that narrative did not, in fact, explain the racial and ethnic disparities in student achievement or curricular placement. Research findings from nationally representative surveys and small local studies consistently showed no significant difference between Black and white students in attitudes toward school. And in many cases showed that Black students, in fact, expressed more pro-school attitudes, higher aspirations for college and so forth, than white students did. Furthermore, other research, work by Angel Harris and others, also showed that students want to do well in school. No student really wants to fail. In fact, students find failure quite painful. Taken together, these findings suggested that disparities were not just about the choices students and their families were making. So researchers began to look more closely at the organization of schools, the policies, and the day-to-day practices. We were beginning to understand schools as racialized organizations. As such, even policies that might appear neutral can in fact contribute to racial disparities. If we use grades to control access to advanced courses, and there are racial disparities in grades in a school, then those disparities will be reproduced in course placement. In other words, the measures of student ability or motivation that we use to determine placement may themselves be problematic. If we allocate resources to schools in affluent and majority white areas, if we allocate more resources there than to schools in high poverty and high minoritized areas, then students do not have access to the same set of resources. This is why equity audits are crucial, because they force us to examine the impact of organizational policies and practices on different groups. Next.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. Next, we're going to just mention here why this is important. Why is access to access and enrollment in rigorous courses important for longer-term student outcomes? So lots of research has looked at the determinants of access, but also at the outcomes associated with taking rigorous courses. These include both higher test scores, increased likelihood of graduating from high school, increased likelihood of enrolling in college, the decreased need of developmental ed once in college or remediation, higher college persistence and performance, increased likelihood of earning a college degree, and higher wages. So a number of things, important short-term and long-term outcomes associated with access and enrollment in rigorous coursework. Broadly speaking, the determinants of educational attainment, now I'm just beyond just rigorous courses, but more broadly, college attainment, labor market opportunities, things like that. Broadly speaking, the determinants of educational attainment are a function of primarily prior experience, right? Prior preparation, which is why we're talking about it today, in particularly rigorous courseworks, and why it's such an important equity indicator as discussed by the report. We also know students' aspirations and beliefs about their future, the knowledge and information they have about how to reach those goals. For example, how to reach aid applications for financial aid or college applications, and a host of psychosocial skills that allow students to persist and thrive in college are also important. Carolyn mentioned some of those as well. These include the belief in success, aspirations, and beliefs, also time management skills, study habits, things that are all very malleable and able to be taught in schools. These, of course, also happen within the context of schools, families, neighborhoods, all intersect and shape the types of opportunities that young people have. So what can schools do? So schools can assess the problem, and we're going to talk more specifically about how they can do each of these things: improve academic preparation, aspirations and beliefs, knowledge and information, fortitude and resilience, and also just listen and prepare.
Okay. So in order to address racial and ethnic disparities in access and enrollment in advanced courses, we need to measure it consistently and systematically. The Committee on Developing Indicators of Educational Equity suggests that indicators of equity in this area should be measured by differential rates of enrollment and participation in gifted and talented programs and coursework for college preparation, AP and IB courses, and dual enrollment programs. We include gifted and talented programs here because we find that these programs are often the beginning of the educational racial hierarchy, setting different groups up on different educational pathways, providing some with the skills and confidence to prepare them for advanced coursework, while denying others that opportunity and convincing them that they are not capable of doing advanced coursework. Measuring different rates of participation and enrollment will help identify the gaps that exist between which groups and in what areas. Have the gaps changed over time? Have they grown? Have they narrowed? Is there improvement among some groups but not others? Outcomes should be measured at the classroom, school, and district levels. Do students in schools with higher minoritized populations in the district have the same access to advanced coursework and effective teachers as their peers in districts in the district's majority white schools? How do different racial and ethnic groups within a school compare on the percentage of students who are enrolled in advanced courses? Are all groups proportionally represented? Are some groups consistently underrepresented while others are overrepresented? Which groups and in which classrooms? Consistent monitoring of the patterns to identify problem areas is an important first step to addressing inequities in access to enrollment and in rigorous courses and programs. Next.
Great. So I'm going to talk about what schools can do to ensure more equity in academic preparation. So importantly, I'll just repeat a point that we keep coming to, which is that students don't end up on their educational pathways by accident. These are shaped by both their choices, but really by the constraints and opportunities available to them through the structures at their school and through the types of encouragement and opportunities they have from adults. And so we want to particularly pay attention to the processes that lead to some of the inequalities that we've observed in course taking. That means that schools can default students to more rigorous courses as a matter of process and not as a matter of proof, the burden on students to show that they can do it, but to actually assume a high level of preparation for all students in a school, removing some of the tracking, some of the inequalities in tracking that have existed for a long time. Also, teachers are not often equally distributed, effective teachers for students. So ensuring that students have access to effective teachers, both across the differences between schools, but also within schools, the teachers teaching some of the most rigorous subjects need to be the most effective for students to find success in those classes. We also want to make sure that students who both are college-bound but also career-bound have access to rigorous CTE opportunities, work-based learning opportunities, and apprenticeship-type opportunities. Importantly, the types of processes to monitor and assess the problem, as Carolyn described, have been done through a variety of equity audits that many districts take to ensure that these pathways are accessible to all students. Particularly pathways that we know have high predictive power of students, how highly predictive of student success in college, for example, math, science, and access to dual enrollment. So monitoring opportunities, and then also providing opportunities for students to catch up. Students shouldn't, by the 11th grade, feel that college is unreachable for them. They should find, schools need to find opportunities to ensure that students have opportunities for recovery who may, to get back on a college preparatory track. Next slide. We also know that aspirations and beliefs are malleable in students and that social contexts matter. As Carolyn mentioned, the research has really shown that there aren't inequalities in students' aspirations and beliefs about the future. It's really in the actual access and enrollment, what schools are doing, what adults are doing, but the students themselves have all very high rates. We do not see racial disparities in rates of aspirations and beliefs in their post-secondary futures. So we know motivation to attend, for example, college is associated with actual college enrollment. So ensuring that we shape students' beliefs and aspirations about their future is important. We also know that self-efficacy, growth mindsets, and other types of social psychological mindsets are important, are associated with both increasing effort and commitment, and that perceptions of belonging in college are key to college persistence. This is important because if students have authentic college experiences before college, for example, success in an AP class or a dual enrollment class or in an apprenticeship, they have a stronger sense of belief that they can do that work and succeed in that profession or in college. Lots of research has shown the importance of access to information. We still know that even among the same even on observed similarities and observed talents or abilities, there's information barriers by income in particular. We know that students, lower income students, first generation students have less access to information about financial aid processes, about admissions policies, processes, college choice, even career choices. So this is lots of research suggests that removing those barriers, increasing information will help more students, particularly lower income students and first generation students enter college and succeed there. But this is also important in terms of academic college readiness, especially in light of reducing developmental ed courses once in college. The importance of academic preparation in K-12 is increasingly even more important. We know today many more students are going to college than ever before, but we are not seeing the same rates in college completion. And so academic preparation remains a key source of information for colleges, but also for high schools to improve. And so really what I want to convey here is that the best source of information for students is actually often doing college before going. That is programs like dual enrollment or AP, again, or some type of work-based learning or strong career technical education experience often give students that best kind of warmer handoff between K-12 and post-secondary opportunities. And then finally, or not finally, but finally of my slides is just this importance I want to note about fortitude and resilience. And when we repeated surveys of students once they enter college, what they wish they knew when they started, or we ask students about sort of why what they're struggling with, many students will report that time management. Today's college students are often having to work while they're enrolled in college, balancing work, family. And so how you develop this kind of fortitude and resilience to succeed in college is also through increased preparation, but also in instruction of study skills and time management and help-seeking behaviors, the importance of how to seek help when you need it, how to do college when it's hard, how to balance work, family while in college. These are all tools and skills that we think need to be developed before students finish high school. Next slide.
Okay. So finally, I want to underscore the importance of engaging stakeholders, students, and staff in the process of addressing racial and ethnic disparities in access and enrollment in rigorous courses and programs, in particular to understand potential sources of resistance to change. What are students and staff's beliefs about the patterns that exist? What are staff members' concerns? Do all staff believe that traditionally underrepresented students are capable of doing well in advanced classes? How might staff members' beliefs affect things like how the class schedule is organized, who is recommended for advanced courses or who is encouraged to try advanced courses? And what barriers do students perceive to their enrollment in advanced courses? Are underrepresented students concerned about being isolated in advanced courses? Are students concerned that they don't have the ability to do well in those courses? It's important to address the organizational policies and practices that contribute to racial and ethnic disparities. But dealing with the ways in which some of these highly visible and entrenched racialized patterns affect how young people see themselves and their own possibilities will also be critical to the success of efforts to undo the patterns.
Thank you both so much, Carolyn and McCall. You have certainly given us a lot to think about. We very much appreciate it. I am now going to turn this over to the Deputy Chief of Transformation and Innovation, Oswaldo Alvarenga at the Dallas Independent School District. And I also, as I turn it over to him, want to thank his colleague, Richard Casel, who's also on the call today and has really helped us in thinking through this presentation and this webinar.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Oswaldo Alvarenga. As you can, we've gone a little too far. So in 2019, we're also looking at this data and this research, and it's very interesting because as we were looking at the students taking advanced coursework, rigorous courses, CTE, we also looked at our policy, right? And we were trying to figure out, is our policy what's holding students back? And just to give you the layout of the land, Dallas ISD has about 140,000 students, 95% low socioeconomic. And as you can see, we've been having these programs available for students. So since the 90s, we've had the top magnet schools in the nation. We have US News World Report. We have number 1, number 3. They fight for number 2 in the top 50. But in 2010, the early colleges came about to give students an opportunity. In 2016, our P-TECH schools came about, which is a form of dual credit and the biggest implementation in the nation. And then in 2019, our CT centers, what we call the Career Institutes, they really came on board to fill out the CTE part of the conversation that we're having. So next slide. Here is some of the impact that our Dallas ISD P-TECH has had. As you can see, just at the top right, 965 students have earned an associate's degree, and they walk the stage actually the week before they graduate. In fact, we have close to 1,000 that graduated last week, and currently their high school graduation will be this weekend. So you can see we have a big implementation. You can see the numbers at the top right, 243,892 total credits earned to date through this P-TECH initiative. And this is focused for students, first generation students whose parents did not go to college. And so it's really for students. There's an interview process, and we really are mindful of trying to get the students into this program. In fact, fun note, about 20% of the students last year, they did not pass the 8th grade exam, state exam. However, they did receive their associate's degree 4 years later. So it's, think about that and what state assessments are and how having supports can get a student through a dual credit program. So anyway, that's a little bit about our dual credit. Next slide, please. The next step is CTE programming. We have 40,000 students, and what we're doing is we're creating 4 CTE centers in the Dallas area. These act like a spoken wheel model. We started this in 1920. Then we opened up some facilities, but then with bond funding, we were able to really get these centers up and running. You'll see 23, 24, the building up at the top. That is our Career Institute North. 18 to 24 months later, Career Institute South will be completed. It's still under construction. And then around 26, 27, CI West, you can see the picture down there, that will be completed. Currently, there's about 5,000 students that are going through the Career Institutes, getting advanced level coursework in CTE, levels 1, levels 2, 3, and 4, getting internships, apprenticeships, and industry-based certifications. We are building up to about 16,000 students going through our CTE centers. And keep in mind, we have about 40,000 students. The rest of the students are in dual credit, are in AP, are in IB, they're in choice schools, they're in magnet schools. So when we say that we have something in Dallas for everyone, we actually do. We have enough capacity for a student to elect these courses. Next slide, please. This was very interesting. We're talking about AP courses. Again, we were looking at the research in 2019, and we were trying to figure out why we didn't have the students in AP Calculus and in advanced courses, right? So you start looking back, and currently the math director, I was supervising the math director, came up to me and he said, well, you know, it's the 5th credit, so students, they have to take advanced, an honors course or a pre-AP course, or the terminal, however it was termed. They have to take Algebra 2, they have to take Pre-Cal, they have to take geometry, and that means that they had to take Algebra 1 in 8th grade. And so really the decision to have more students in advanced placement did not happen senior year. It didn't happen 11, 10, 9. In 8th grade is when they had to have taken Algebra 1 for high school credit. And everybody's like, okay, so that's what the decision was made. No, not really, because that meant in 7th grade, they had to be 7th and 6th grade, they had to be accelerated. So really the decision was made in 5th grade. And so that's how long-term we had to be thinking. We had to, in 5th grade, we had to see what the students, which students were going into that track, right? That advanced track. When we looked at that, a number kept coming up, about 20%. No matter where we looked, about 20% of our students were in the advanced track. No matter what school we looked at, it is 20%. And we're like, why is this number 20% coming up? Because we looked at the policy, and you know what the policy said? Anybody can go into these advanced classes. So the policy was right. It was just said anybody can go with parent, with or without even parent permission. If the student said I wanted to go into the advanced track, they can go. But yet it was 20% across the board. Well, we found out, well, there's 22 seats, you know, in the next grade level. And we have one teacher that teaches one section of this advanced coursework, and there just happens to be 22 seats. No, so in a given year, if we had 10 students who we thought were advanced, it doesn't matter. 22 students kept going to that next level. So, so here's what we did. We got into the policy. In that year, the math director came up to us and said, hey, there's about 1,000 students who, based on their state assessment, should have been in the advanced track, and they weren't. And we were like, what? Why were they not in the advanced track? So we did a little bit of research, and long story short, we ended up changing policy. Any student now in Dallas ISD in 5th grade who meets or masters on their state assessment, in other words, if they're on grade level, they automatically will go into the advanced track. So that immediately pushed that 20% now to 30, 35% in 1 year, because these students actually, they deserve to be in that track. But because there was no one pushing them, or someone didn't identify them, or the seats were taken, that conversation basically went out the door when we said, okay, everyone who met and masters. Well, then there was a scramble. We had to get more teachers, more seats, more chairs, more sections, because now a lot of students who met and masters at the 5th grade level were now going into that 6th grade track. Fast forward, last year, normally we had about 20% students taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade. Last year it was closer to 60%. 60% of our students in a big urban school district 95% low socioeconomic. They were taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade at a high school level and passing it. So now that means that we are now marching as freshmen, sophomores, and juniors with about 60% of the students able to take those advanced placement classes. So next slide. And as you can see, we made the news because of the policy change. You can see how we had in 18, 19, 17%, 33, 36, and how that jumped up to the current percentages. And actually, they've gone up since then. And that was because of policy work and then, of course, monitoring and leadership. So next slide. Well, the state of Texas saw our scores and they were wondering how in the world are we getting so many students to Algebra 1 in 8th grade for high school credit. And they actually passed a Senate Bill 2124 that basically said, guess what? If any student met or masters in their state assessment, that that the school district needs to do everything. It's our policy that they will be, but the way it's written here, that basically it's in the second paragraph that they're in the 40th percentile on the 5th grade state assessment, then they will need to be put into that advanced coursework. So that's something that started here in Dallas, and now it's involving the whole state. Next slide. So what are we doing? We have to create more AP courses because we did not have as many AP courses because we did not have as many students in those AP courses. We started what's called AP University or Advanced Placement University. And you can see we had to expand our programs. Every school, no matter if it was a small school, they had a few AP courses. If they were a large school, they had a lot of AP courses. So there was inequity in the city across campuses. And so AP University brought 9 course offerings, core courses, like AP Calculus, Computer Science. And so we went from the next slide. You can see this was the previous and how that happened in 21, 22, 22, 23, and then 23, 24. So we went from basically 396, we added 100 more AP courses in the district. So we're about 493. So it took policy work, it took meaningful leadership work at every level to ensure that we can get these students into those high level courses. Next slide. And that was it for us. So thank you from Dallas ISD.
Thank you so much for that presentation. And I already see that we have some questions in the chat for you when we finish this up. I am now going to briefly present a case study about Memphis-Shelby County Schools. Memphis-Shelby County is working hard to increase access, enrollment, and success in rigorous coursework. James Smith, the Advanced Placement Manager at Memphis-Shelby County, has presented information on the work at the district at several conferences. And he's also been quoted in research on this topic as well as in EdWeek. His email is on this slide, so if you have any follow-up questions, I strongly suggest that you reach out to him, and I'm sure he can share some of his previous work and presentations. Next slide, please. Like Dallas, Memphis-Shelby County is one of the largest school districts in the country with 22,000 high school students. Memphis-Shelby has a large Black population, and in the last few years, the Hispanic population has been growing. So today, the Hispanic population is probably about 5% larger than it was 3 years ago. The county or the district has 27 traditional high schools, which are not academies, which do not include their academies or alternative schools. The alternative schools do not have AP classes, as students are not typically assigned to these schools for a full year. But because of the district's AP Virtual Academy, which I will describe in a moment, a student who was at a traditional school and then moved, let's say for disciplinary reasons, to an academy can continue their AP classes through the virtual academies. Next slide. This year is Memphis-Shelby County's 3rd year of expansion efforts. As you can see, in just these years, Memphis-Shelby has significantly increased its access and enrollment in AP classes, with 34% more students enrolled in the last 3 years and 28% more courses offered. So this isn't sections, but this is actual courses. One way Memphis Shelby has accomplished this is through the requirement of at least 3 AP, 3 pre-AP courses at each traditional high school. This also assists with vertical alignment, as courses then can feed into one another, with the pre-APs feeding into AP classes. The two biggest obstacles facing Memphis Shelby County schools are 1, the teacher-student ratios, and 2, teacher administration retention. So turning first to the teacher-student ratios, if a school has under 500 students, given the staffing model in the district of about 28 students per classroom or per teacher, that means that each teacher has about 150 to 200 students, really only allowing teachers to teach the core classes, not the advanced courses, which require additional periods. Once, however, schools are reaching around 600 to 700 students, the schedule allows for more advanced coursework to pick up and the master schedule. So this was like a main obstacle to getting in even these 3 AP and the 3 pre-AP courses. But as I'll talk in a minute, a place where the virtual academies really comes into play. The second obstacle that the district was facing is teacher and administrator turnover. You know, it's hard to have a school culture and knowledge in teachers to teach advanced classes if there's high turnover. So it's incredibly important, right, to have the leaders that are staying in those buildings and to build a culture of the importance of access and enrollment, as well as success in rigorous courses. The next slide shows that in addition to the growth of the AP classes, which the last slide showed, as well as the growth in the number of students enrolled, many of the methods that the district is undertaking are also addressing equity. So while this is not a perfect match with the population slide that I previously showed, you can see that Memphis Shelby is enrolling at very significant rates historically marginalized students in their AP classes. Next slide. So here are the 5 areas that Memphis Shelby addresses to really grow access and equity to rigorous coursework. And I'm going to briefly run through each of them. Next slide. The first area is early identification and recruitment. Using the PSAT 8-9 in both 8th and 9th grade helps the districts identify students that may not know that they have the potential to be successful in advanced and honors classes. Additionally, given the migratory nature of some families in the district, it also provides some data on students who may not have a lot of data within the Tennessee school system. The district also uses platforms to gather data, including a section in the Power BI data system, which they use solely to address advanced academic courses and bring together data, including state data, AP potential data, and the Tennessee Value Added Assessment System AP potential data, which uses all of the Tennessee data to look at potential using longitudinal data to help assist with the determination of AP potential students. The district has also implemented Ready Graduate Plan, and this is a program where district representatives meet individually with each high school in the district to go through their master schedule and to make recommendations of additional advanced classes based on school-specific data, including student data from the Power BI and the PSAT 8-9 data, but also on specific information within the school, such as their pre-AP courses, their AP courses, and IB programs already in existence, as well as who the specific teachers are in the building and what their skill sets are. They also use this time to discuss new College Board APs or pre-APs that might be a good fit for the students and teachers. The district spends a good amount of time also figuring out how to engage students and parents. There's AP newsletters, emails that go out regularly to parents and students, as well as AP information nights, which are targeted by school, not by district, and are critical ways that the district engages with parents and students. Next slide. In addition to the early identification and recruitment, the district focuses on the pipeline, which is something that we just heard Oswaldo talking about also in Dallas. Really trying to think about how to make sure more students are prepared to engage in this rigorous coursework. To do this, the district, similar to Dallas, has set up benchmarks that if a student meets the benchmark, they are automatically enrolled in middle school and in high school in honors courses. So this is where the district is looking at teacher information and testing data and automatically placing students in to classes where parents need to ask out, not ask in. They're also increasing the number of pre-AP courses and are currently the largest purveyor of pre-AP courses in the country to really engage students and show students that they are prepared for these more advanced classes. They do an honors and AP summer camp to expose students to rigorous coursework. And they also, while doing this, bring the students for 2 weeks to the University of Memphis campus, exposing them to college life, and getting students excited about the prospects of what rigorous coursework leads to. Next slide, please. To grow access, the largest thing that the district has done was to mandate at least 3 AP courses and 3 pre-AP courses in each of their high schools. So they, out of their 27 traditional high schools, they have 23 of these high schools have met this mandate, and all of their AP classes are offered in person. They also have an AP virtual academy, which is taught by Memphis Shelby teachers. The teachers are at a central location, but they're meeting synchronously, so not asynchronously, but synchronously with students. And they're doing this in different ways for different schools, because some of their schools are on a block schedule and some of them are on a traditional schedule. And they're making sure that these students in these other high schools have access to 6 courses this year. And their goal is to be up to 8 courses next year. And finally, they have AP Access for All, which is a state-run asynchronous program, which provides access to additional AP classes. Again, this is asynchronous and state-run. You'll see it's where they have their smallest number of students, given that this is a very student-driven way to have access to such classes. The next slide. It's incredibly important for the district's work to be felt and to be able to continue is to support their students and teachers. This slide lists several different ways that the district does it. A couple just to highlight, they mandate AP Summer Institute trainings for all of their high school teachers. 35 teachers attended it this year. They have district-wide AP advisors that focus not only on content areas, but also provide differentiated assistance within schools and within classrooms. They offer students Saturday school reviews, where at least or approximately a quarter of all of their student population who's taking AP attends these classes. They recognize the importance of supplies and materials and provide additional funding for them. And they also provide stipends for teachers who are mentoring and tutoring outside of the classroom, as well as bonuses for seeing growth within the classroom. And the final slide that I have before turning to question and answers are just opportunities for growth. The district is really thinking about constantly how to switch honors courses to AP classes, as well as how to switch regular classes to honors classes, how to have lower access courses such as computer science principles, so which don't require, as we were just talking, about, all of the requirements that you need to have to be able to get to calculus. If you don't, you have to be able to start algebra in 8th grade. These are like lower access courses requiring less background, as well as really looking at new piloted programs such as AP African American Studies that they believe would be of interest to their student population and really bringing those in. So I again want to thank James Smith for his help on this work, and now I want to turn this to questions. And I see that that I have a couple. So I'm going to start with the questions that came in before turning to some of my own. Maybe we could highlight we could take down the slides and highlight the panelists, if that's okay. Thank you. I don't know how to take down the slides. So one of the first questions is going back, I think, to sort of the math example that was used. And the question is that it seems like middle school is where students learn that they're sort of either good or bad at math, and that this belief then seems really entrenched in high schools. And David Butenfeld is asking, is middle school the best place to focus on changes to access advanced math? Should we even be focusing on this earlier in elementary school? Maybe I will start that with Oswaldo, and then if Carolyn or McCall want to jump in.
Sure, absolutely. In middle school, we have to accelerate. That's where the acceleration happens. But the state assessment that we use is in 5th grade. And of course, that means that the elementary foundation that they get is what is used to identify them to start advancing in middle school. So you're absolutely right. There has to be a great foundation in elementary school in order to get ready to accelerate. We don't skip standards. We cannot just jump from 6th grade to 7th grade. We have to accelerate through all the standards. And so with that heavy acceleration, that means that just needs to be a great elementary foundation. So absolutely, I think the elementary, that work starts in pre-K. There's even some research that says there's a tighter alignment for math skills leading to academic success than reading skills in pre-K. Northwestern University. So we thought that was great. Obviously, there's much more research with reading.
Anything, okay. Did Carolyn or McCall want to jump in?
I'll just add that I support everything as well as said about the elementary years, and just also make sure we don't, just a point Carolyn made earlier in her talk about the structural barriers. I just, for example, I worked with some urban schools in California where, for 7 out of 9 months, a whole cohort of 8th graders got a uncredentialed teacher in math as a long-term sub. And so I just want to remind us that there are still lots of forces that shape what students in the comment. It's, are they good at math? Are they math people? It's sort of hard to fault these students who then later are in high school and behind. Is it really because they're not good at math, or is it because they didn't have these opportunities? So I just want to mention that there's also structural forces that we still have to address in addition to sort of assessments of earlier and improvement of instruction, even in elementary grade.
Thanks. Another question that has come in is thinking about all of these diverse curricular pathways, and we've talked about a lot of different ones. We've talked about AP, dual, enrollment, CTE academies, IB programs. The questioner is asking, how, when we're thinking about equity and we have all these different pathways, how do we think about equity? Which gaps are we looking at? Can we be AP gaps might still exist, but maybe there is a different pathway where certain students are. So is there advice for measuring this concept of equity any broader than what we talked about today so far? I might turn that to Carolyn first, if that's okay.
Sure. I'm just thinking about the report that we did. There were multiple equity indicators, right? And this is just one. So we're just focusing today on access to rigorous courses and programs, but certainly there are other areas that you want to focus on in terms of understanding equity. But when we think about equity, I think it's also important to understand that we are thinking about how we provide resources where they are most needed. So it doesn't mean giving everyone the same thing. It means giving those groups that need it more of the resources or whatever it is that they need. And so we need to think about equity in that way. I think we, for a very long time, have been talking about equality. And while we don't want to throw that out, we also want to focus on equity. So I just want to remind all of the audience that we really were just focusing on one aspect of equity in educational outcomes, but there are many more. And so this was not to ignore those other ones or to say that they're not important.
And another question that has come in is focusing on, the use of data points to determine if students should be placed in different classes or in honors classes and so forth. I know that in Memphis Shelby County, while they do look at the PSAT 8, 9 in both 8th and 9th grade, they are looking at a lot of additional data, especially if there is longitudinal data for students if they've been in Tennessee for a while. They're looking at stuff that teachers have said. I see Ajit, who is on this call, who is at the Connecticut Department of Education, explained what they do to identify students. Oswaldo, do you want to jump in and answer that question for Dallas?
Sure, absolutely. The main, we think of this as ramping on and ramping off into advanced coursework, right? And we want students to ramp on. One of the biggest ramps is that 5th grade to 6th grade. It's not only dependent on, it's policy that if they meet or masters, that they're automatically in and parents have to opt them out. But then there's parents can get them in. A student can self-identify and get in. Also, teachers can get in. Now, some students, they perform differently different years. So what in the slide that I showed, it was a car and there were kind of like ramps. In 6th grade, if somehow it turns on, they're now in a smaller group that's focused. They're taking 6th grade standards. But then they start getting that understanding of mathematics that they can get Algebra 1 in 8th grade. Then they ramp back on and start accelerating towards 8th grade. Even in 7th grade, if somehow they just started, light bulbs are turning on in 7th grade, we still have another ramp on to get into 8th grade algebra. These ramps we call them Algebra Bridge because it bridges that class to Algebra 1 in 8th grade. If they take Algebra 1 in 8th grade, that gets them, that ensures them that they have a path to get to AP Calculus. If they don't take Algebra 1 in 8th grade, it gets just much more difficult. So it is not just one point. We call them ramping on and ramping off, and vice versa. If a student is accelerated and they're like, I really, math is, my parent, the parents have to come in and opt out, you can ramp off to grade level. So it's there are some folks that, math might not be their thing, but we have these ramps where they can ramp on and off.
Thank you. There's another question. Does CTE pathways involve or require involvement of post-secondary institutions?
So for Dallas ISD, we have our dual credit P-Tech programs, which they are 60 dual credit hours. So they heavily involve our post-secondary institutions, our Dallas College, which is our community college network. We rely heavily on them, and it is the biggest implementation in the nation. So, and then we have our career centers or institutes, where these are high school courses. They are working with industry partners. They are getting industry-based certifications. And only when it's appropriate will we have some dual credit. But all these programs lead, or they have the college program at the community college, so we can ramp onto them. So this would be for the student who's just, regular high school career, is in band, football, and they're just, they're going to go on to a community college. Their CT program leads to there. So I would say everything from 0 involvement in some programs to 100% involvement.
Thanks so much. Being respectful that we have already gone a little bit over time, I think I wanted to sort of close out by asking each of the panelists, and I see that Richard has joined us, so I would love to ask Richard also, do you have any sort of closing or parting thoughts about equitable access to coursework? What the school districts that are on the phone might be thinking about as sort of entryway points. And maybe even for like Oswaldo and Richard, like I sort of highlighted some of the bigger challenges that Shelby Memphis is facing, wondering, what sort of challenges you guys are facing and thinking about. Maybe I'll start with the two of you so that Carolyn and McCall can think about what they want their closing remarks to be.
I think from just, you're either, I've heard this before, you're either a system of schools or you're a school system. And in order, if you went to a small 3A high school, you might have your choice of 2 programs of study. If you're lucky enough to go to a 5A high school, you might have 4 or 5 programs of study. So, and if you're in this part of the city, if you're in South Dallas, you might have less opportunities than you would have had in North Dallas. So we have to ensure that programs are not only offered there, but there's just consistent push in every part of the city. And so that's why we're creating for CT programs 4 centers in the north, south, east, and west area, so that every comprehensive high school has access to at least 18 different CTE programs. Our P-TECH programs, they're at every comprehensive high school in every single neighborhood. They're not at certain neighborhoods. They're not in certain areas. And so that's a heavy lift. We always have to do a lot of work to ensure that equity is in the forefront. I'll turn it over to Mr. Kessel, who, from the leadership perspective on equity.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Oswaldo. I was a high school principal and an executive director when Oswaldo and the leadership team were designing these crazy policies of equity. And so what I would really want to impart here is that it's one thing for it to be written in policy. That's almost like creating equal access, similar to what Dr. Tyson mentioned. The work actually happens when the educators, the principals, and central staff have a high level of coherence. In that space, we understood the expectations, we understood the purpose, but we also needed the supports that were necessary to help our students. So that really did look like, I heard from one of the questions, we need multiple data points. Absolutely. It's easy from one data set, one test, to create equity and say anyone who reaches this score can access it, and anyone who, doesn't matter where you are. But the reality is, we use interviews. We use other modes of opportunity to see where students are successful, where they're talented, where they have opportunity. We want to hear their background. Dr. Kurlander talked about the situation where, a student who didn't have a teacher for that year. We have to really look at those elements and recognize what's gone on in your space, so that way we can put you in the right space and in right environment. And so equity really is about getting and creating the environment that's necessary for our students to be successful. And you have to get down into that lens. And so the policy is great because it pushed that space, but then the practitioners have to turn that into reality. And it's a back and forth between those implementers and those policy builders. And so you can't give up on one another in that space to make it happen.
I'll go. I just hope the folks who joined us today, whether they are school leaders or staff, feel encouraged by the examples that were presented today from Dallas and from Memphis Shelby, that they're doing the work and they're having success. And even with challenges, they are persisting. And so I hope folks feel that they're not alone in doing this work, and there are other districts that they can reach out to, and also the foundation for support in doing this work, and they're likely to have success. And so, yeah, let's keep doing the work.
I'll echo that. Yeah, keep doing the work, and that the work can be hard. I think sometimes we move at slower paces of people's comfort, and I think the goal really here is to address to disrupt the disparities does really mean examining closely the processes as we've discussed. So I think it's really wonderful to see examples, and for folks who want the research based on these, I think there's a wealth of studies referenced in the references section, and so I encourage you to look at those as well.
Thank you. I want to thank all of our panelists. I want to thank the Equity Assistance Center. I'm going to ask if they could scroll through to the slide that has the providing feedback on it. So while some of our remaining panelists are here, if you wanted to use the QR code and provide us feedback, because we have a couple more of these that we will be hosting soon, and we want to make sure that that we're providing you information the way that's most useful to you all. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. And again, thank you so much to the panelists.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for this, Amy and Carolyn and McCall and Oswaldo and Richard. We really, truly appreciate your time with us. And again, as Amy stated, you'll see in the chat the link to the survey, but there's also the QR code here, and we would love to have your input. Also, we will send a follow-up email along with the survey link as well, with the recording of this webinar, as well as any additional resources that we'll attach to complement today's webinar. And again, if you would like to inquire about using the services of the Equity Assistance Center South, please visit us at www.exsouth.org or send us an email at exsouth@southern.education.org. And again, thank you all so much for joining us, and have a great day.